Marhaban. Hello. My name is Ian Campbell. This is the 12th in a series of videos intended to teach you the Arabic alphabet and sound system and to prepare you to understand how to learn vocabulary words. In this lesson, we're going to learn one more letter of the alphabet, lam, that'll leave us with 3 more to learn, one special character, lam alif, and also alif lam, which is how we say the in Arabic and how it sometimes changes how we pronounce things. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the letter lem. So lem is a connecting letter and it makes the English L sound. But if you're a native speaker of English, you might not know that there are 2 L sounds. The one in la, 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 where the tongue is right behind the front teeth, and the one in bell or fill, where the L sound is coming from the back of your mouth. In Arabic, the letter lem is nearly always the frontal L sound, the la, la, la sound. There are a couple of exceptions, notably the word for God, Allah, but most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, the letter lem is going to give you the la, la, la sound. So let me start over here with how we make this letter. It's one of the biggest ones, and by itself, it looks like a big old capital English J. The key important part of this is that the tail of the letter comes all the way up and back around. It goes down below the line and comes back up. A lot of people will make L, lem, look like this, and this is what you do not want to do. Sit it on the line like this, and the reason is because people will confuse it with calf. So let's not do that, okay? So here's the letter lem. Sometimes people will put a little fancy tail at the top of that, but we're not going to do that here. And it's pronounced la, 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 like that. The frontal lem. Hardly ever the back of your throat lem. So if we draw it, we can say, here is lem by itself, a long vertical line, and then cruising down and back up again. At the end of a word, it's going to be exactly the same thing. It's going to come from the previous letter, and then sometimes you'll go back down with your pen, or sometimes you'll pick it up and draw it like this. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter. In the first position, lem is going to look a lot like alif, just a vertical stick. But then it's going to connect, unlike alif. It's going to go to the next letter. And in the middle of a word, it's going to be like an alif that connects as well. Here, this time I'll go down and back instead of taking my pen off the paper. So lem is pretty easy to draw for the most part. The key thing that you need to do is make sure that in the final and the solo forms, it goes well below the line and comes back up again. That's the chief mistake students will make with it. So it's easy to draw. It's mostly easy to pronounce. What'll happen is you as an English speaker will see lem at the end of a word, and you'll be prone to pronouncing it like oh, like you do in bell or fill. And you need to unlearn that habit. So for example, the word for question is su'al. It has a hamza in the middle of it, and for rules that I'm not explaining right now, the hamza needs to sit atop a letter waw. The waw isn't actually in the word, it's just a chair for the hamza. Kind of a comfortable chair too, nice and rounded. So su'al is question, not su'al like it looks, but su'al. And here's lem at the end of a word. So you want to say su'al, L, and get your tongue in the front of your mouth, not su'al, like you would in English. That's the only tricky part about pronouncing the letter lem, is to make it la, 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 instead of ol, like you will want to do at the end of a word. So that shouldn't present a problem for you. So now we're going to move on to another character, which is lam alif. If you make a lem, all right, we're going to go down and make our stick like this, and then we're going to go on to the next letter, and then we're going to make an alif, and we're going to come out with something like this that looks like a really skinny capital letter U in English. Long ago, it was decided that that looked bad, and it was visually confusing. So what people did was they invented an entirely new character to make lam alif, and it looks like this. A long arc like this that goes below the line, and then a stick coming in, sort of like a weird English capital letter Y. And this is the lem and then the alif. It the lem really doesn't connect. It goes down here, and then the alif connects to it, and then whatever comes after is not going to connect because alif is a non-connecting letter. So this is this funny character that we put in place of lem alif. Sometimes people will write it like this. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's kind of how it looks in print. And this is something you'll see fairly often. And if you write it this way, it's no big deal. Everyone will be able to understand you. Now, since lem alif is a non-connecting character, it cannot be the first or the middle in a string of letters. It can only be the last or by itself. So when it's the last one, you're going to come up from whatever the previous letter was, go back down again, make your arc that goes well below the line, and then put this diagonal line in like this. And then you're going to stop because it's the final in a series of letters. Whatever the next letter is going to come after it and not connect, like this. If it's by itself, you can make it in one of two ways. You can make it in the way I just described it, or you can make it in this loopy form like this. Maybe want to angle that a little bit to the left. I don't usually make it this way, which is why it's a little awkward to me. But this is quite common, and you'll see this a lot. So this is the lem alif character. Whenever you have those two letters in a row, you're going to do it like this instead of what the normal letters would tell you you ought to do, which is to make it in this kind of weird capital U shape. So don't do this, and don't let lem by itself sit on the line. Those are the two most common mistakes students will make with respect to this. So that's lem alif. It takes a little getting used to, but it really shouldn't be a problem for you. And I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of it in a moment. Then we have alif lam. Alif lam is Arabic for the. So we're going to make an alif, and then we're going to make a lam, and it's going to connect to whatever the next letter is. So it's going to look like two parallel lines like this. This was probably the reason people made the lem alif character, so as not to confuse it with alif lem. So alif lem is what it's called. It means the. We don't have an a or an in Arabic, but we have a the. And it attaches to the beginning of a word. It's not a separate word. So for about half of the letters, the first letter of the word will absorb the L sound in alif lam. And I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples of this in a moment so you can hear how it works. It's really not that challenging, but it's something that confuses students because it's not generally well taught. And I'm going to explain to you how and why that is. So the rule we're going to follow is that if the word's first letter uses the front of your mouth without moving your lips, it will absorb the L sound. If the word's first letter uses your lips like b or f, or the back of your mouth like ha or kha, you will hear the L in alif lam. And the best way to teach, or the best way to learn this, is just to watch a bunch of examples. So here I've given you a whole boatload of them, which may be a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to walk through them one by one. So first I'll give examples of lem by itself. So here's the word la'aba. La'aba means to play a game or a sport, not an instrument. So la'aba. So here's lem at the beginning of a word, just a vertical stick that does connect, unlike an alif that does not connect. Here it is in the middle of a word. Yal'ab, he plays. So here's yal'ab, and then we just go up and down again to make our lem in the middle of a word. It's very simple. Here's lem at the end of a word. Tafdil. Tafdil means preference. So tafdil, here we have our lem, and then it goes all the way down and comes back up again. This is the key feature of final and solo lem, so please pay attention to it. And then here's this word, ittisal. Ittisal. We don't have a hamza below the alif here, and some words don't get their hamza below the alif, and I will explain that much, much, much later. So ittisal means link or communication, and here we have lem by itself going all the way down and back up again. Here's the lem alif character, la'ib. So you can see it has the same root letters as this one over here, la'aba. So a la'ib, when we put alif in between the first two root letters and kasra in between the second and third letter, we get the do-er of that action. So a la'ib is a player, like a soccer player. Yulahiq. So here is the alif lam character attached to a previous, the lam alif character attached to a previous letter. So yulahiq, he pursues, is what this means. And you'll see it does not connect to the following letter. And so this is what it looks like when it connects to the previous letter. Here's what it looks like solo over here. And many words, especially when they begin with alif lam, will have two lam alif characters in them. This is very common. So ittisal over here means communication. And al-ittisalat, that's plural, communications. So if that's your major or your minor, or you have a friend who studies that, that's what they study, al-ittisalat. So two lam alif characters in the same word, actually fairly common. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the letters of the alphabet and show you which ones absorb the L in alif lam and which ones don't. Remember that our rule is if the first letter of the word uses the front of your mouth without moving your lips, it will absorb the alif lam, or the lam in alif lam rather. So here we have beit. It looks like beat, but it's beit. Beit means house. So when we say b at the beginning of the word, we use our lips. So we're not going to absorb the L in alif lam. So what we'll do sometimes is in a very fancy vowel text, you will see someone draw a sukun up here to remind you that the L is going to sound and blend into the B. So al-bayt is what we say, the house, al-bayt. Now the letter ta here, tayyar, means current, like electrical current or in an ocean. So here's ta. So ta we pronounce right up at the front of our mouth, and we don't use our lips to do it. So what happens is it will absorb the L in alif lam. We're going to write al-tayyar, but we're going to say at-tayyar. We won't hear the L. And so what will happen here, the ya has a shadda over it. People will draw a shadda in there to make it clear that it's double ta and not lam at all. So at-tayyar, at-tayyar. It's hard to learn this at first, but it's natural. It takes less energy to say at-tayyar than it does to say al-tayyar, and that's the reason people do it. Sometimes in a textbook, you'll get a table of letters, and it'll be like these letters do it and these letters don't. And that's a terrible way to learn it because you don't want to have to memorize this giant table. Just make it natural. If it's easier to not pronounce the lem in alif lam, then don't. So thalaja means refrigerator. So th, we use the front of our mouth without moving our lips. So we're going to say athalaja. And draw a shadda here if we really want to. Most people won't really do this. You'll only see it in very fancy texts, like religious texts, just to make it absolutely clear that you're pronouncing things right. Here's a new word, jami'a. Jami'a, often pronounced jamia, like that. This is the letter meme here, letter M, which I'll give to you in the next lesson. So j is pronounced in the back of your mouth, so we're going to hear the lam in alif lam, al-jamia, like that. Harf is letter, like letter of the alphabet, and ha is pronounced all the way down in the bottom of your throat, so we hear the lam, al-harf. Khabar is a piece of news, khabar, and it's pronounced in the back of your throat, back of your mouth, really, rather. So we're going to hear the L in alif lam, al-khabar. Dars, though, is pronounced up in the front of your mouth, dal. A dars is a lesson. So we're not going to say al-dars, even though we're going to write what looks like al-dars. We're going to say ad-dars. It's just a tiny bit easier to say that, and that's why people do it. A veil is a tail, like on an animal. So we're not going to say al-veil, because that's a little harder. We're going to say ad-veil, because it's easier. Reef is the countryside. So ra is pronounced right up at the front of your mouth, because this is Arabic ra, not English r. So arif is what we're going to say. Arif, not al-reef, like we've written. Zayt is oil, but the kind you use for cooking, not putting in your motorcycle. Although I do know a guy who uses cooking oil in his motorcycle, and it works. Don't even ask. So zait is oil, and we're pronouncing it up in the front of our mouth without moving our lips. So we say azait, not al-zait. Su'al, I just gave you for question. So we're going to say as-su'al, not al-su'al, like it's written, because it's just a little bit easier to say that. Shems is the sun, the one up in the sky that's burning hot here in the middle of August. So sh is up at the front of your mouth, so we're going to say ash-shems, not al-shems, like it's written. So sometimes when people teach this, they'll tell you that the letters that do absorb the L in Alif Lam are called horof shemsiya, sun letters. And the other ones are called horof qamariya, moon letters. And that sounds really romantic and wonderful, but isn't really very useful. Just learn by practice, and you'll get this much more quickly than if you try to memorize which letters do it and which ones don't. So sabah is morning. Make sure you can say ha at the end of a word. Sabah. So we're going to say as-sabah, not al-sabah, like we write. Daif, a daif is a guest, like in your home. So da is up at the front of your mouth, so we're going to say a daif, not al-daif. Talib, that's what you are, a student. Literally, it means a requester, but ta is up at the front of your mouth. So we're going to say at-talib, at-talib. If you're a female student, like many of you are, you have to call yourself a talibah with a ta marbulta, and ba gets to shrink down to one tooth. So women raised in Western culture often have a great deal of trouble remembering to refer to themselves by feminine nouns and adjectives. Everything in Arabic is gendered, so you have to learn to do this. But you're still going to be at-talibah, not al-talibah, because it's a little bit easier to say at-talibah. A dhufr is your fingernail, so here we're going to say the, and we're going to say a-dhufr, not al-dhufr, like it's written. An ulba is a can, like a can of soup or potatoes, or I don't guess potatoes come in a can, but whatever. Al-ulba, and is all the way down in the bottom of your throat, so we do hear the lam in alif lam. Al-ulba. Al-gharb, gharb is west, like the direction. So since ghain is pronounced in the back of your mouth, we're going to hear al-gharb. Farq, a farq is a gap or a difference. So fa is pronounced with your lips, even though it's pronounced up in the front of your mouth. So we're going to say al-farq, like that. We're going to hear the lam in alif lam because we used our lips. Al-qamar is the moon up in the sky. So al-qa is pronounced in the back of your mouth. So we hear the lam in alif lam. Al-qamar. So these lists that you'll sometimes get, we'll call the letters that don't absorb the L in alif lam huruf qamariya, moon letters. Again, this is romantic, but not terribly useful. A kitab is a book, and you pronounce ka back in your mouth, so we say al-kitab. Layl is night. Lots of words begin with lem, and if we're going to put alif lem on them, we have to put two lems in a row, which looks weird, but is correct. So al-layl, the night. And it doesn't really matter here whether you're absorbing the L or not, because they're both L's. So al-layl is night. And we've got 3 more letters to go, and I will teach you how to say them with alif lam as we learn them. But for now, I'm going to say ma